The Projection Booth podcast is sponsored by Scarecrow Video. Try out Scarecrow's rent-by-mail service. Choose from over 150,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Visit scarecrow.com today.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
When I saw Claire again for the first time that summer, it was at a party given by, let's say the exes. The young girl in the white dress and Claire were friends, obviously. But beyond that, I sensed a strange link between them. A kind of electricity, although I had never heard it said that Claire was particularly interested in girls.
She has pretty hands.
Yes?
She likes doing that, you know. It excites her. I can prove it to you if you like. She loves it when we put her on her knees so we can whip her, doesn't she?
It's getting hotter and hotter outside.
I regret, my dear, that we're obliged to keep our clothes on. But in our roles, you understand, it's indispensable.
To you especially.
Yes.
Don't you ever get too hot?
No. Never.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Heather Drain.
Hello, hello.
Also back in the booth is Ms. Jessica Shires.
Hello.
This week we are sticking to the year 1975 with a look at Radley Metzger's The Image. Based on a book by Catherine Robbe-Grillet, writing as Jean de Berg. The film stars Carl Parker as Jean, the author of the piece, Marilyn Roberts as his estranged friend Claire, and Mary Mendum as Anne, who loaned her name to one of the other titles of this film, The Punishment of Anne. Meanwhile, I first saw this as The Mistress and the Slave, if that's a hint to what this film is all about. We will be discussing that and spoiling the plot, as it were, as we go along. So if you don't want anything ruined, please turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen The Image. We will still be here. So Heather, when was the first time you saw this film and what did you think?
It's been several years now at this point. Of course, I first got hooked on Radley Metzger via Camille 2000 and the Licorice Quartet, and it was love at first sight. So I was like, this is a guy I have to see as many of his films as I can. The Image, of course, was one that for, back in the day was a little harder to find, like uncensored. Spoiler, there be pee, so... For a long time, it was a huge taboo. I mean, even in hard, straight up. I mean, this film is kind of hardcore. It's hardcore-ish, hardcore-esque, but full-on hardcore films. For a long time, you couldn't get uncensored versions of Barbara Broadcast, which is one of my favorite Henry Paris films, which was Radley's nom de porn. Probably at half of Annie Sprinkle's catalog.
Thus the name, yes.
We love Annie. We love her. She's a goddess. And it did not disappoint. And it's definitely, as somebody who first saw Rebecca Brooke, I always think of her as Rebecca Brooke, Mary Mendum. She's Rebecca Brooke in pretty much almost all of her softcore films with Joe Sarno. And that's where I first saw her. But I think she's absolute dynamite here. And I'm looking forward to getting into the meat of the matter with you two.
And Jessica, how about yourself?
I, too, am a huge Radley Metzger fan. Similarly to Heather, I saw things like Camille 2000 and Licorice Quartet and fell totally in love with his work and set out to find just about everything. I think around the time that I got into Metzger was when some of the stuff was starting to appear on DVD. So Cult Epics, I think, put out a few different editions of sort of the late 60s, early 70s Metzger catalog. And that was when I discovered Score, and I think Blue Underground put this one out first, before the Lush Melusine edition that just came out. It had the most incredible packaging I think I've ever seen. As I mentioned in the previous episode on Story of O, I came to Story of O first through the book, And then I realized it was a movie of it much later. But in this case, I didn't know about the novel until well after I think I'd seen the film. And I was like, oh, this is based on a book? Like, I've got to check this out. And then, as I'm sure we'll get to, like a whole world of not just the novel, but the real people surrounding the novel just kind of opened up. And the whole thing is just so interesting to me, which is why I wanted to talk about it.
Like I mentioned before, I think I saw this first as The Mistress and the Slave, which was a Something Weird release from I don't know how long ago. It was VHS, and the quality, it's tough for me to even use the word quality of it because it looked awful. I love Something Weird, and I love that they go above and beyond trying to give us films that we can't see anyplace else. And like you said, Heather, this was tough to find for a while. So I saw it first under this title, and I just remember the video quality just being really tough to even make out what was going on. But I was really intrigued by this movie. I thought for the longest time that this was, now this is going to sound weird, I thought this was a European film, not that it's shot in Paris. I see the Eiffel Tower, but the way that everybody is dubbed, all ADR, it just feels very much like these are not American actors that are being dubbed post later on by somebody else. But no, these are the real deal. So I guess it's just the ADR and probably having to shoot this thing silent and then bring in everybody later on. Also, the voiceover of our main character adds to that as well, just with his very voice of God that he has. I'm so excited to talk about this in comparison with Story of O. We talked last week as far as it being a woman voiceover, and here we have the male voiceover, the male author of the story, even though it's not a man who is the author of the story, but also someone going under a pseudonym. So I love the comparisons of these two movies and just how different everything is. The lushness of this story, how beautiful this looks. I mean, now seeing this on Blu-ray compared to that shitty VHS that I saw all those years ago, it's night and day. This doesn't even look like the same movie.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned kind of a European feel about the film. I think that comes across even in a bad version. I think that's just part of Metzger's style. I just think I think a lot of people are kind of, he has an American name, but, I think if you just see his films, and I think a lot of, like, sort of critically, he gets lumped in with, a lot of the European exploitation directors, like, Jean Roland, Just Franco, he's in this, spoken about in the canon that's discussed in the Immoral Tales book that came out in the 90s. So he's kind of seen as part of that sort of European and exploitation canon. And I think he shot a lot in Europe, like, similarly like Score is shot in Europe and Camille 2000 is shot in Rome. And I think he plays such importance on, like, incredibly, even on a short budget, an incredibly lush visuals. Like, I think that was really important to him as an aesthetic choice.
One can make a really good argument that Radley Metzger may be the most European American director like we've ever had in any genre. All of his films, even some of the really, like, the lesser ones, like Maraschino Cherry, still has just that sheen about it. Like, his attention to detail, his use of mirrors, and almost pretty much in everything that he makes. And here we, right down to, talk about the image. It's all the images and the reflection. And also with that, are you really seeing the real person, or are you just seeing the reflection? And I feel like that kind of thing comes up a lot in his films. The way it opens really made me think of the opening of Camille 2000. It's just got that great wide European shot. The use of music, it always blows my mind how much, like, library music Radley used, because he used it so exquisitely. And also, at one point, the music in this film sound like psych rock when it gets really intense, which I love. But it's just the way everything's kind of blue. There's almost just sort of this, like, melancholy to me almost. There's, like, a beauty tinged with that, which he does so well. That's one of my favorite things about Radley. It's not in all of his films. Like, Barbara Broadcast is maybe my second favorite film of all time of his. And that film is light as a feather, but this one, I feel like, has a similar open. It's a very different film, obviously, than Camille, but I love how he always has those connective tissue going on.
Rob King, in his new book about Radley Metzger, talks about the various identities of, Henry Paris, Radley Metzger, and how they're they're, despite the fact that he used different names, it's still, there's still a unifying body to his work. And, even though some of the hardcore movies were more comedic in nature and the sort of softcore movies were a little more melancholic in nature, like still you can't really separate the two. It's like his body of work is just so singularly, unified despite different approaches that he uses.
Now, I have read the book of The Image, and I don't know what the provenance of the translation is, but I will say that both in the book and in the movie, we are not shying away from harsh language like we did with Story of O. There's no back passage. There's very frank language that's used in this. Even though the book itself is only about, 45 pages or so, it is great. And this is much more my speed. When we look at Story of O, we look at this is definitely where I'm coming from. And I love how faithful to so much of the book Metzger is. I mean, he's almost treating it like a screenplay. It is so similar in the language, so similar in the scenes, even some of the more cringe lines, like, is my little girl going to do a pee-pee? Like those kind of things. But it's right there in the book. I was reading that again last night. I was like, okay, yeah, I just want to verify that this one line is here. And sure enough, and there's a little bit of difference at the end, and I'm sure that we'll talk about that, but I was just really impressed by how faithful he was to this story.
Yeah, incredibly faithful. Like, and right down to the title cards that you see. It's not only like the exact same title cards the divides up the film the way it does the book, but it's also in the same font. Like, if you look at I'm speaking specifically about the English translation here, the Grove Press. Like it's in the same typeface with the sort of, box around it. Like he was very, incredibly faithful to the book, with some, sort of small and also very interesting diversions. But yeah, I agree.
He does some interesting things, though, when it comes to, the use of visuals, obviously something that we don't get with the book. So things like the after the urination scene, when he is, our main character, Jean, is parked by a fountain, which I believe we see the fountain beforehand.
Let's get into the fountain.
And we have all of that. And I thought that was great to have the fountain imagery. And not only do we have the One Piece scene, but that is the flashback of all flashbacks that we keep coming back to throughout this whole thing. And I love that it's just such a great degrading moment for Anne. We don't really get a whole lot of Anne's inner thoughts. It is so much, it's Jean. He's telling us his version. But the actress that plays Anne, she is great when it comes to letting us know what she's thinking through her expressions, because she doesn't get a whole lot of dialogue in this film.
Anne, at times to me, is almost like a sylph. She's almost like almost just like a phantom of a woman. And a part of that's at times because she's given so little autonomy. I mean, but I love this performance because there are moments though where we do get that little flash. Like one of my absolute favorite parts in the whole movie is when, after she runs into Jean on the street, he runs into her and she's totally rude to him, which I love. I don't know if I need to go ahead. I'll save my Jean rant maybe for a minute, but she's totally rude to him, and rightfully so. But then, of course, he snitches because, if he was in prison, he would get stitches.
Also noticed about that scene actually is her clothing. And so not only is her personality completely changed, but she's dressed totally differently from how you see her in the rest of the film, which is very like little girl, like, skirts and like gingham blouses and very feminine, very little girl. But like in the Bouquiniste scene, she's wearing like, very like contemporary 70s clothes. And she's, very like, self-confident. And, she's just, John just like rocks up to her and she's just like, what do you want? And I just like, I absolutely love that. I think she is great in this. And I think she has those moments and, again, we'll talk about them in later scenes, what and in a way similar to Corinne Clary's performances. I think she is able to do a lot with facial expression. And so she's not just this blank cipher like all the way through the film. She's not a robot. She very, there's scenes where, she has this sort of wry smile. And I think, there are scenes where she's blank faced, but I think there are moments where it's very intentional that she's meant to sort of not be reacting. But I think she gives a great performance. I think both Marilyn Roberts and Mary Mendum, and we'll save Carl Parker for later. I think the two women give really incredibly strong performance. I think Radley was so great at casting women. I just think, and Mary Mendum was his girlfriend at the time. So, I mean, there's, partially she was his girlfriend. So that's kind of probably why she got the role in some way. But I think she's very well cast in this.
Oh, gosh, she's dynamite. No, and when the scene where Claire tells her to go grab a whip, and the way that she kind of looks at herself in the reflection with all of these apparatus, and she does almost like a little dance. Almost, you can see this little fire,
little smile, kind of crawls across her face,
and it's so. I love her performance so much, and like the moments where she is just kind of like tuning out. It's to me, it's almost like she's like, well, this is what I got to do to please the one person I actually give a shit about. Carl is just like a means to an end. He is not. He's not a full person to her, nor should he be. But I need to wait. Carl, Jean. I'm sure Carl Parker, the actor, is lovely. Sorry, sir.
And similarly to those scenes we were talking about, where she sees herself in the reflection of the sort of cabinet with the whips and the chains and stuff like that. I think she goes back twice. This is the scene in the apartment where, kind of Claire is showing Jean the photographs and stuff, and this is the first time he sees and punished. And the second time when she goes back to get the chains, she goes back to this cabinet twice. And there's this great scene, and it's not really in the book in any way. So it's completely an invention of Metzger. She turns to the camera and she says something like, "Forgive me, I know what I do." And then she walks back in I just loved that. I just thought that was so great. Loved it.
She's a great actress in the Sarno films. I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Sarno. I respect him. I respect his work. He's a little too soap opera for me, a little bit. Even when he's like delving with taboo subjects, it's still just like, I don't know, it doesn't connect for me like it does when somebody like, say, Cecil Howard, delves into those subjects, or Radley, or Damiano. But she's great, and I think this is definitely her and Claire, the actress that plays Claire, Marilyn Roberts, she's such a strong. Marilyn Roberts just has a strong physicality about her and intensity, and yeah, Radley loved women. I actually, years ago, I was working on a project that never quite came to fruition for other reasons, for assorted reasons, but with Eric Edwards, and he, lovely man, he's a sweetheart, but he, of course, was in Private Afternoons with Pamela Mann. And he had a complaint because, of course, I was like, oh, my God, you got to work with Radley Metzger. I'm fangirling, of course. And he liked Radley, but he honestly, he felt neglected because he's like, Radley wasn't really interested in directing the men. Some of that might be actor ego. Actors are very sensitive people. But as we all are, artists, we are sensitive as shit. That's what we do. There are few directors, I think, love women as much as Radley Metzger does, in a way that never feels like objectifying. It never feels gross. Like, it feels very much like an artist. I always admire that about Radley. And even when he's dealing with kind of tough topics. I mean, this film, it is erotica technically. I feel like there are parts of it, especially when we get to the climax, it's almost like it turns almost into quite a horror movie. It seems to be a lot more for me it's just more about an unhealthy dynamic and an unhealthy relationship. There's like going kind of beyond the borders of just like traditional S&M, which, BDSM could normally, from my understanding, has like set rules. Like you follow the rules that keeps everything in line, buttoned up, but it keeps also everybody safe.
When you're navigating the complex world of BDSM, you want to do so safely. And choosing the right framework for your practice is crucial, but it can be confusing. In this episode, we're diving deep into SSC, RAC, and PRIC. So which one of these acronyms is right for you? Well, let's break down each protocol to find out.
Just to jump to that last scene, I mean, it's a very boundary pushing scene. I think even now, some people were very jaded will look at this and say like, oh yeah, that's tame. But I mean, if you really think about it, like, just this Gothic chamber scene, it's really intense. And again, I think it's largely due to Mary's, sort of ability to like, show this character in like, in distress and in pain. And like, I think it's really visceral. And there is a discomfort kind of level of watching, of like going, wow, really? I mean, just this chandelier that just pulls her up. And I think that's the horror movie feel of it. And again, it's like Gothic chamber, which also you see in Story of O, like, it's again, returning to this theme of that. There is like a sort of horrifying element to it, like a torture chamber element to it.
I connect with this material so much more, especially in that scene where it feels like she being Anne is really pushing herself, because you want to take as much as you possibly can for the person that you want to serve. And the way that she will hold up her arms to signal kind of like, okay, I'm ready now for it to continue. I really like that, because it's just this kind of signal to her mistress that, okay, it's good now. I can take more of this. I really want to please you. So that's how I was reading all that stuff. When it comes to the movie overall and the story overall, I mean, I'm curious what y'all think as far as the title of The Image and where that comes into things.
There's not a ton of criticism that I've been able to find about this book. There's some. I found some, sort of literary. And again, this comes, as I mentioned in the Storyville episode, the image is referred to in Susan Sontag's essay about pornography. From what I've read about in the analysis of the novel, is basically that, Anne and Claire are images of each other, or Anne is an image of Claire that she's projecting, and again it goes a little bit back to the sort of the motif of photography, because she invites Jean over to show him these photographs that she's taken of Anne, and then of course there's that one last photo that's sort of clearly not Anne, and he kind of knows and she kind of knows he knows, and she seems uncomfortable for the first time because she has this like very like sort of perfect facade. And then Jean talks about the fact that like part of the reason why like he finds her beautiful, but part of the reason why he feels like he can never he's not attracted to her, or he can't initiate any kind of romantic relationship with her, is because she doesn't have that vulnerability that he desires. Again, so we get the image, we get, and again, photography also a story of like this is a kind of an interesting theme that unites the two, because O is a photographer, Claire is a photographer. And so like there's this literal image of like these photographs and how it relates to identity. But I think more metaphorically, Anne is the image of Claire that she uses to sort of train Jean to be the kind of man that she wants, and to bring him to her. That's kind of what I've gotten out of it in terms of like what the title means.
Before I go into my take, though, I have to, Mike, your thing about it being hotter, I totally get that. And this may be, I don't know if this is a hot take. It's certainly not meant as one from my end. I'm not the biggest fan of it's Jakin?
Just Jakin.
Jakin, yeah. Yeah, say it French.
We know what you mean.
Yes. And
Yes. Jessica says it much better than I do.
Way better than me, because I'm going to make it sound like just Jakin, and that's terrible. I think he knows how to make stuff look beautiful. I think as a filmmaker, all of his films look gorgeous. I find that for me, I don't find a lot of substance in any of his films. I kind of, prefer almost something like Gwendolyn in his filmography, which is just total fantasy, because I feel like that lends itself well. Whenever he tries to get philosophical or deep in his films, it doesn't connect with me. Everything's individual, subjective. I don't find his films hot, because I feel like to me, it's almost like licking, not quite, he's better than Playboy, but it's almost like that, where it's like, yeah, these are beautiful naked people, and I'm not getting any heat. I'm not getting any depth, Yeah,
I think Radley has a much more sort of personal connection to his films. Like they feel much more like, and that's nothing to say. I mean, I'm actually a huge fan of Jakin, so I'm not. This is not to denigrate.
Oh no, total
his work at all. But
he's talented.
I feel I can personally feel that like Radley invests a lot, and that may be because he sort of, he didn't have as big of budgets as someone like Jakin had. He had like smaller budgets and probably smaller crews, and worked with people that he knew, relatively well for the most part, and it was probably more of a tight knit situation. And I just think he invested a lot more personally in his films, and I think that's visible. That's just my opinion.
Radley knows how to have something cook in the atmosphere. He knows how to frame something. He knows how to edit it tightly where you're building that tension. Like that scene of Barbara Broadcast between C.J. Lang and Wade Parker. That's one of the hottest scenes, period, in film
100%.
history. Oh my God. I'm like, whoop. It's like total vapor inducing. And so, Mike, to your point, I do get that. And that scene in particular, I think the mid scene where she's getting punished by Claire, that one I think is the hottest personally in that film, because she seems the most into it. Where there are other parts where I'm just like, anytime, I think when Jean just gets involved, I'm like, he gets too involved, I just start getting gross. He's a little too, he's forceful in a way that I don't think is appropriate. And especially with food, I'll get into that. I'll save that though. Your question, the image. Claire and Jean are using each other and they're using Anne in a way that's not really truthful for anybody. Everybody's just focused on the image of Anne. Anne is an image. She's not a person. And especially to Jean. I think Claire and her, we get little glimpses of tenderness. One of my few complaints of the film, I probably would upset the dynamic, but I almost kind of wish we got a little more of her and Claire, because the little hints we get, especially when, the ending happens and Anne leaves, there's that tenderness. And I'm like, I kind of love that, because I feel like you see more of that in other sort of S&M films and scenarios and literature where there's that, there's the punishment, but there's the reward.
Yeah, that's a great scene. And it's that scene is actually not in the book.
Oh, wow.
That scene, the scene in the Gothic chamber ends with, Jean having sex with Anne, and then it ends. And that's it. And then it moves on to the last chapter. So to just describe the scene to anyone listening. So basically what happens is Jean gets up and Claire is infuriated and begins to whip him herself and just, cursing at him and just telling him off. Presumably because, there's like a jealousy aspect there. She's a little bit, or it's ambiguous a little bit. I mean, you could interpret it, at least at that point in the film, as being like either she's jealous or, she feels like he's taken too many liberties with her slave, I guess. So she whips him. John kind of starts to fight back. And then Anne grabs a champagne bottle and, breaks it over Jean. And then, he kind of just is like, what the fuck, and like runs. And then there's that beautiful moment where you've got like the iron bars and like Anna's on one side and Claire is on the other. And they look at each other like really tenderly. And they kind of touch hands, I think, at some point. And like Anne says something like, Anne says, "I'm leaving." And Claire says, "What will I do? What do I do?" It's just so wonderful. Like I said, it's not in the book, but I just think it shows how much Radley understood the text, really. Like, it's just a really nice addition. It's I think it flows nicer into the following scene. And it kind of makes you wonder, I personally would be like, where's Anne going? Because I have this like sort of thought, and especially after talking so much about the story of that like, kind of like, was Anne trained at Roissy? Did she go through this like just some of the, it's because there's a line where Claire says something like, it's all down to training, or something like that. And I'm thinking like, ooh, what if Anne is a disciple of Roissy and like went under the same training as it's a like, just my own kind of like sort of like, what if? But yeah, it's a great scene.
I love that scene in the park with the urination scene, just because of the way that Claire is dressed. And that she looks like a complete ice queen with the white pants, that she wears pants, whereas Anne is always wearing skirts. And then she's got that long white coat and the white hair. And then those great 70s glasses. Which
I love those sunglasses so much.
Looks like they're blue blockers, from the 90s. So.
My name is Geek. I put them on as a shocker. Man, I love these blue blockers. Everything is clear. They block out the sun. Oh, yeah, I got to get me some.
That was great. I love her outfit. Well, I love all their outfits, but I love her outfits especially. There's one where it's like kind of like a shirt dress almost, and she's wearing these brown leather.
The like thigh high boots with a like mini dress. Like, so
I love
good,
it.
so
and
great.
The thing, especially for me, is the zipper with the little circle at the end of the zipper. I'm just like, oh, that's so nice. It so reminds me of like, I don't know, like a velour shirt that you might have worn back in the 70s.
The whole thing with the rose garden, too. Did anybody else kind of think a little bit, and I mean, they're unrelated, but I love it when you have like sort of similar imagery in art, is the whole thing with the rose kind of made me think of the rose coming up in The Beast, like Borovchik's Labette, because God, both of those guys just total titans of knowing how to frame an image that just makes it completely unforgettable and just mesmerizing.
We were just talking about Borovchik last week, which was funny because we were talking about the private collection that he and just Jekin and Terayama did.
We referred to your article about Fruits of Passion, Heather.
Oh, yay!
We cited you.
Oh, my God. I love, yes. Oh, Don't even get me started. I love that film so much.
But I was just going to say about the rose and the iconography is like, there's a great line, which is also in the book, which is, when Anne has her skirt pulled up and Claire is kind of like adjusting the rose in her garter, and she says like, it's just something like, to Jean, like, oh, it's, isn't that beautiful? I wish we could take a photograph of it. He says something like, yes, it's nice, but it's overburdened with symbols in the surrealist tradition. I thought that was a hilarious line, and I like checked back in the book. It's actually like verbatim in the book. So you can think of like almost like, I don't know, something like Matisse or so many of the surrealists. And you can see that for sure, but I just think the line itself is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, next thing you're going to do is put an apple in front of a guy's face? Come on.
Jean, he's the water bug. He is the water bug for me in this movie. And I don't know if part of it is because I kept thinking if it was a different actor. And I mean, Carl Parker, he is in Score. And I liked him. I mean, he's a telephone guy. He's in it probably for like, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But he's great in Score. I liked him. I had no problem with Score. He looks great. He has a great look about him. He's physically attractive man. I kept trying to recast Jean in my head. And like, would this character hit me better if it was somebody, say, like John Leslie? Because I'm thinking like classic adult guy. Somebody who can play a cad who is, who is still cultured, who is good looking, who has a dark edge to him, but you're still sort of magnetized to him.
Yeah, even dubbed, he is still incredibly wooden, even though we know it's not his voice. It's not, it just, I think it was some interview I read where, Radley Metzger, because basically like he found Carl Parker because he was like in a cigarette ad or something like that. Like he was in this very successful series of cigarette ads. And that's how he initially found him. And he was just like, yeah, it's like his acting is totally wooden, but he looks great, So like that was why he hired him.
He does have that chin, man.
He does.
He's technically good looking, but it's just like anytime like he got anywhere sexual with poor Anne, I just resented him. I'm like, he doesn't deserve this woman. He does not deserve her. And then especially like the way he like forces her head down with the first oral copulation moment. Like, I don't know why I'm saying it like that, but I try to be a lady and I fail. I didn't like the way he did that. I was like, I don't like the way he's handling her. One of the restaurant scenes where he's just willy-nilly stuffing food inside her is literally makes me cringe. Okay, first of all, anybody listening, this is your PSA. The vagina is not a horn of plenty. The vagina is not a deli tray. Okay, it needs a pH balance. You have to respect the pH balance, okay? You're going to upset it by putting fucking caviar. He puts caviar inside her. I'm sorry, Mike, you and I have talked about water power. I was less upset by the enemas than I was by him putting olives. It's not a martini, sir. That's a woman's vagina. Respect it. You shouldn't even be allowed to touch it. You don't deserve it.
I totally agree, Heather, but I'm going to guess that that's like some kind of Bataille reference, like Story of the Eye, inserting round objects. That's just my guess. But yeah, it's still gross.
It's gross. I don't think because it's him. It's him because I've seen people do that in other films, and I still think it's a little like real life. Please, people, take care of your orifices. They love you. Love them back.
I think it was all for the punchline, right?
I know, but that doesn't make it better. They could have picked better food, like a grape or something at least. A cherry, not a fucking olive. Ew.
I think a cherry tomato too, if I recall correctly. There's like an olive yeah.
Is there some mozzarella cheese?
Keep that pussy vegan. Do not be putting dairy products at your vagina, okay? Treat it like a natural food store. I know it was the punchline. He doesn't sell it for me, and I just cringed. It's her and Claire. I'm fine with. I'm like, yes, you've got my attention. And it's not one of those things where it's, because some people might be listening and be like, oh, well, maybe she just has a problem with S&M or strong males. Listen, you two know me. I love a lot of films that have probably gotten me canceled in some circles, and that's okay. He's really miscast, and he looks great. I think the cigarette ads Silva cigarettes, like Silva. I don't know where that just came to mind. It's like a brand you don't really see now.
Yeah, I can't remember. But it has a great tagline, a great horrible misogynistic tagline, which is like, cigarettes should be like women, rich and thin.
God, he's the worst. He's not even Sean in the ads. And I'm like, God, you suck so hard. Why are you so terrible? At least the story of O's got Udo Kier.
Well, and last week we talked about Story of Joanna, and can you imagine if it was Jamie Gillis in this movie?
I thought about that. I'm like, Jamie. Oh my, yeah, that would
be still my heart.
I know. to quote the great Laura Helen Marks, we'd all be having a case of the Gillies, because it's when you get the willies and they're kind of good, you like it, but you're also a little terrified, and that's the Jamie Gillis experience, and we're all down for it within reason. But yeah, no, that's the thing is, Radley has had some great male actors, though. So we talked about how he does love women. But think about Licorice Quartet. Frank Wolf is amazing in that film. His performance, I find, is actually, it still haunts me. That's one of the many things that haunts me about that film. Frank Wolf's great. All the Henry Paris stuff have really strong male characters. Score, you have the great Gerard Grant and Casey Donovan. Both of those guys are total dynamite. Carl Parker for the 5 minutes is fine. And give him 5 minutes and don't give him a lot of dialogue, and don't make him put canopies? I'm just canapes. Let me just completely sound like somebody who eats easy cheese. I don't, but I promise. But yeah, then Harry Paris, you get Jamie Gillis, you get guys like Eric Edwards, Michael DeTore, or aka Michael Gaunt, Bobby Estier. You get all these great actors. I'm amazed he never worked with John Leslie. At least not one of the bigger films, to my knowledge. Like John Leslie movie. Poor Carl Parker, he's kind of just like the water bug in the punch bowl, and especially with these two women that are just like, you have to really keep on your toes, because they're great. They're like these two. You've got, I hate using the term alphas, but these are two strong presences. Even though Anna's like the sub, her presence, Mary Mendum's presence, and just, yeah.
Her eyes are just amazing. And she does such great acting through those eyes.
She really does.
God, she would have been amazing in the silent era. With that face too, because it's not just that she's gorgeous, she's pretty much perfect looking, but she is so expressive. Like, she's such I really wish she would have had more of an acting career.
A lot of, at least what I know about this film, I learned from reading the Rialto Report's amazing article on this, on basically like all aspects of the film, the actors, like where it was shot. And I don't want to repeat too much from it because it's so interesting. And anyone who's listening to this, I so highly recommend that you read it. And it's reproduced actually in the liner notes to the Melusine UHD of this, but it's so chock full of information. But I mean, one of the I guess what I was gonna say is he talks about the backgrounds of the theater backgrounds of Mary Mendum and Marilyn Roberts for that fact. Like they were both like, theater actors, like trained actors, and Mary Mendum especially, like he kind of describes her as like, because he interviews her, and some of the interviews reproduced how much she loved acting. And it's just like, she just would take anything, at least when she first started out, was just taking like, everything she could. And she just like loved acting. And it just got to a point where she wasn't getting cast in anything that she felt, excited about, and then just kind of gave up, which is so sad because like she is so really talented. And it's just like, you look at her filmography and you're just like, wow, she could have done so much more if she'd just been like given the right opportunities. And I wonder if, and again, this is also in the Rialto Report article, is that the story goes that she had a sort of serious falling out with Radley Metzger after, or even possibly during the making of this film. And basically like they broke it off because one side of the story is that he had an affair with someone in the production. Another side is, she didn't like the way he treated her badly or something like that. So there's like a couple of different versions of why they separated, but they, had a very bad breakup after this. And I just wonder if maybe because of that, like, they, if they hadn't, could they have worked together again? Would there have been different opportunities for her? Just like, did she sever some professional ties by doing that? I mean, I don't know, but obviously with Joe Sarno, who she went on to work with, and she was also in a Max Picas film, I think, that 1001 Perversions of Felicia or something like that, which is interesting. I think he may have been one of the French producers of the Image, so maybe that was how the ties there worked.
You were talking about the essay that comes with this, and yeah, it's basically a book. It's like a cultography size book, it feels like, for this. I'm not going to make a big deal out of this. I did, when I picked up the Blu-ray, one of the reasons why I picked it up was because of the audio commentary, because it was supposed to have one, and it doesn't. And I know there's a lot of scuttlebutt out on, like, Reddit, where people just love to fight, all those kind of things. And I'm just like, listen, it was probably... somebody said that they could do it. They ended up not being able to do it. There were technical problems at the end, whatever. Like, we're all familiar with the audio commentary business. And I'm just like, okay, it's not a big deal, but I'm always curious about the behind the scenes stuff. So if anybody knows what the story of the commentary for the image is, I'd love to hear it. Because sometimes those stories are almost as fascinating as the film itself, but I know it's not going to be, because it's probably just going to be a footnote. But yeah, again, just going back to just how freaking beautiful this transfer is. And like, for me, having witnessed it in that horrible, horrible way, and then to see it this way, where it just feels like this came right out of the projector. I mean, it looks amazing. I couldn't see a scratch on this. And I was just so happy with how gorgeous this film looks. Like, you're talking about the locations. I mean, the interiors of this look amazing. The lighting in this is fantastic. Everything about this movie just sings for me. And I'm so glad to be able to revisit it now and see a proper transfer of this.
Yeah, the shots of Paris are just so incredible. I recognize so many of those. I'm just like, oh, it's the Place de la Concorde. Oh, it's like, it's so amazing to like see all those, like, it's just glorious, and just like, you can't really fully appreciate it without a proper restoration, I think.
Well, and Radley, he's just one of those guys where everything, I mean, all film needs to be preserved, but his stuff is so visual and so visually dynamic. And just from like the top, I've even noticed how like different characters will have a specific type of nail varnish. I mean, they even I love that they mentioned it in this film where, because he notices, he's like, well, Anne never has her nails painted. And when he's like, clearly, oh, okay, that's Claire's. That is a photo of Claire. But and I love that. But even in his other films where there's no commentary made about the dress or the makeup, every single person, even if it's like somebody who's on screen for like 2 minutes. I mean, think about Valerie Moran in this film as the salesgirl.
Oh,
like
God.
like her having the yeah, it's a great scene. And that's like the one scene I can kind of deal with Sean, because it's like we got like Valerie Moran's she's the Oreo filling, so I could tell.
At the same time, though, please, if you are very kinky, don't feel that everybody else in the world is kinky. You can't just go into a dress shop. There's got to be something else going on. You can't do what they do in this movie. That's really rude. So
they got very lucky.
Exhibitionists beware. So that's all I'm saying.
I've worked retail. I think all of us have had to work with the public. In reality, the couple that walks in are not going to look like Mary Mendum and Carl Parker either. It's gonna look like I don't know, like Jesse Helms and like Sandra Lee or somebody. It's got to be
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. It's gonna be. You're gonna need a 3-bagger, maybe a 4-bagger. If somebody walks in, nobody wants to see that. This is where the fantasy of erotica comes in for sure. And at the sales girls, beautiful Valerie Moran, she was so great in Wet Rainbow with Harry Reams and Georgina Spelvin. But I love like even her little string of pearls that she like makes a point to take off when she's about to go in there and be a little naughty. Why does she not lock the door? I'm like, God, everybody's an exhibitionist in this movie. I'd be afraid of getting fired. I'd be like, I better go lock the door because the boss will come in and be like, what are you doing? But yeah, just the little touches. Yeah, Radley, his work really merits, because there are some films that it's nice to have restored, but if I don't have like the nice Blu-ray, I don't sweat it. It's like when Pieces got that beautiful, I was glad to have it, but Pieces is such a wonderful, bonkers, grotty slasher film that I kind of didn't mind it in potato quality.
There are some movies where I'm like, I'd rather see this on VHS. Like that movie, I'm sure that Grindhouse did a fantastic job on it. Impulse with William Shatner.
Oh my God.
That one, it feels like you should be watching that on 12th generation VHS, taped off of late night cable someplace.
Yeah, it's so weird, like now with like this rise of films being rediscovered and put on, like, not just Blu-ray, but on, like, UHD, all these, like, video nasties that were, like, passed around in the 80s on, like, scratchy, 12th generation bootlegs, like, getting, it's like, whoo, it's just like, wow, I didn't know I needed to see this. And like, I don't know how improved it is seeing it in a sort of flawless presentation, but this, yes. I just wanted to say that the cinematographer on this movie, so again, from Ashley West's article, so basically, like, Radley worked with, like, a French crew on, like, the when he was shooting in Paris, and the cinematographer is actually a really, like, accomplished cinematographer who worked with, like, Jacques Becker and René Clair, and so I think that's a lot of the credit is due to the cinematographer on this one as well, just because it's just beautifully shot.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break. First up, we're going to hear from Rob King. He is the author of Man of Taste, the erotic cinema of Radley Metzger. After that, we're going to hear from writer-director Lena Mannheimer, all about her 2014 documentary, The Ceremony. And we'll be back with both of those right after these brief messages. Looking for something superior to streaming? A place with more than 5 times the selection available on all streaming services combined? Check out Scarecrow Video's Rent by Mail service. Select from an unparalleled collection of over 150,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Get in on it now at scarecrow.com and rediscover the wonders of physical media. Well, first I want to find out a little bit more about you, Professor King, and can you kind of tell me what your background is and how you got into academia?
I've been an academic like most of my working life. At a certain point, I wanted to be a film critic and tried my hand at that, but I wanted to write more long-form stuff, and so academia seemed at that point in time the most direct path towards writing that kind of stuff. A lot of my previous work has been on slapstick comedy. I wrote a book on the history of the Keystone Film Company and a book on the changing fortunes of slapstick short subjects in the transition from the silent to the sound period. So with the Radley Metzger book, I was really broaching very new terrain for myself, at least. Yeah, so that's kind of my background, I suppose. There's some sense in which I feel like fate brought him circling around me many, many times. When I started my job at the University of Toronto, where I started in 2007, my office neighbor, Bart Tester, introduced himself to me, and he knew that I was teaching class in cult and exploitation, and he was like, "Oh, I wrote this article on Radley Metzger." By the way, an amazing article. And so at that point, I hadn't seen any of Metzger's films. So I read the article. I looked at some of the films. Then later I got a job at Columbia University and I started here, and I was teaching cult and exploitation again. And a colleague, Hilary Brower, said, "Oh, I know Radley Metzger. Maybe I should put you in touch with him." And so she did. And so in consequence, he would come to my class and introduce his films when I had one of his films on the syllabus. It was always the Licorice Quartet. Licorice Quartet was always the film that he wanted to screen. Obviously, this was towards the end of his life. I think he showed up maybe in 2013 and then again in 2015. And then in 2017, he passed, obviously. So that happened. And then after he died, I felt a certain sense of regret of not regret obviously of his passing, but regret at not having taken the opportunity that had just landed in my lap and that I hadn't really done anything about. Like, I should have interviewed this guy. I should have done oral history or something. No, but this then kind of put it in my mind to wonder whether I could write something about him. Because I was kind of bored by that point of writing slapstick comedy. I already knew my opinions on the topic, and anything else that I was going to write would just be stuff that I already had thought. And so I did a conference presentation on Metzger. I was thinking that maybe I'll write a journal article. During the pandemic, however, this was, I want to say, late summer of 2020. I was browsing on eBay, and I noticed some items of his on eBay, like things that shouldn't have been there, like his birth certificate, for example. Like, why would that be there? What had clearly happened was that after he died, someone had purchased his storage unit content There were kind of reality TV shows about this. I'd love to have seen the one where they opened up and it's all Radley Metzger stuff. And so they bought it, and then they were just reselling on eBay. Everything was $10 a piece. Absolutely everything, from like stuff that was not worth $10 to stuff that would be worth a lot more than $10. So I mean, I didn't get some of the earlier stuff that had already been posted, which was some of the real nice pieces like the birth certificate, but I got everything else for relatively a bargain. And so at that point, it was like, well, this is clearly a book. Like I now have like the Radley Metzger collection of some sort that's sitting in my closet still at home. I'm going to donate it to Columbia University Library, because Columbia was the university where Radley did his MA in theater. But just to give you an example, he would transfer all of his films. He transferred them, from celluloid first to VHS, and then from VHS later he transferred them to mini DVs. And so a lot of what I have now are those mini DV transfers. Here's an example of one. This is the image. I mean, this obviously isn't going to be helpful for podcast listeners, but imagine a teeny tiny size videotape. But that's the image with his. I assume that's his writing on it that says the image. Who knows what's on it? I don't know. I haven't had that digitized yet, but I'm going to work with the library to get it all digitized, and hopefully future researchers would be able to look at it as well.
So how do you even approach a topic like Radley Metzger? Do you go more for biographical information first and then kind of dive into the films, or do you start studying the films and then kind of work out from there? I mean, what's your approach for this book?
The field of porn studies is a giant field within film scholarship, but it was one that I had no exposure to. So one thing that I did was I kind of, I boned up on like my porn studies. Maybe boned up is not the right word in that sentence, but so I read a lot of the important secondary literature. At the same time, I was, doing the same kind of research that I knew how to do from having done earlier histories. So this was a matter of, looking at, going to New York Public Library, looking at clippings files for the individual films, going through Variety, going through Box Office, Independent Film Journal, things like that. But I think the appeal of doing a project like this is, or at least for me at that time, was that, as I mentioned, I was kind of sick of doing comedy. And I already know what I'm going to find in Variety from like 1931 or something like that. So the advantage was that it opened up an entire new spectrum of source material that I would not have considered before. I think the Rialto report obviously has done an amazing job of digitizing a lot of adult magazines that covered the film industry, the adult film industry during this period. So it was very eye-opening to be able to have a look at that and to read that. And then I would look at Screw. I found that they had microfilmed copies of Screw, the Al Goldstein journal, New York Public Library. So I went through those. So it was, in a sense, it was kind of similar, to the research that I'd done previously. It was just that it was very different sources. And that was exciting. It allowed me to kind of rip out the canvas of who I thought I was as a film historian and to try on new hats. As a historian, one thing that I always try to do is to use the biographies of individuals as the frame that kind of links the various pieces together. That's always been very important to me. But in the previous studies that I'd wrote on Keystone, on early sound slapstick, there's a constellation of many different individuals. With Radley Metzger, there was one Radley Metzger, or two if you include Henry Paris. And so this was really a pleasure to be able to write around a single life in that sense, as opposed to braiding together a network of individuals.
With early silent and sound film, I mean, that's very difficult to get your hands on that actual thing, to get your eyeballs in front of some of those pieces, I imagine. How was it when it came to the Radley Metzger stuff? Was it all fairly easy for you to find, or did you have to go digging for some of these earlier films of his?
It was much easier. I didn't have to go on a trip to the Library of Congress to watch films, or like go to UCLA Film Archives or anything like that. Basically, all or like 95% of the material by the time I was starting to write had been put out there. First through a series of DVDs by First Run that came out in the late 90s. Those were mainly the Audubon and softcore stuff. Then there had been special Blu-ray releases by what are the distributors like Cult Epics and things like that, and they were all excellent. And many of them had directorial commentaries as well. So it really was an embarrassment of riches. But those commentaries were enormously helpful, especially in terms of centering Metzger and Metzger's voice, like the ability to actually to always have him on the page in his voice, like the things that he said about X, Y, and Z. Previously, I might have poo-pooed the directorial commentary as like, that's too easy as a historical resource. I changed my mind. These are enormously valuable, and it was enormously valuable to kind of to get Metzger's voice into the book.
You mentioned Henry Paris before, and can you kind of talk about the difference between what a Henry Paris film is versus a Radley Metzger? And especially, you point out in your book that The Image is a Radley Metzger film amongst a group of Henry Paris films.
The Image is really an unusual film in that respect because, when the porno chic era began, with the success of, obviously it began before Deep Throat, but it was Deep Throat that really opened up the floodgates in a meaningful way. Metzger realized that, I suppose, that the jig was up in terms of softcore, in the, no one's going to be interested in, in watching a little bit of something where you can, have the, where you can see everything now. So he took a gamble and, took up a pseudonym, Henry Paris, and began making a series of hardcore films beginning in 1974. But, The Image was a film that he had actually shot before he took up the Henry Paris mantle. But he hadn't released it because of, the Supreme Court Miller decision in 1973, which was, in part an attempt to tamp down on the growing spread of pornography during this period. But it gave him, enough reason to kind of hold off on The Image. In the interim, however, he decided not to hold off, in other respects, and decided to see if he could play in the kind of gray area of making pseudonymous hardcore films under the Henry Paris name. The films are very different, the Henry Paris versus the Radley Metzger films, and I think the key difference is comedy, actually, which brings things back into my old wheelhouse. All of his hardcore films are comedies. They're very, very funny. And in fact, to watch them with an audience, I screened Misty Beethoven at Light Industry back in March, I think, of this year. To watch it with an audience and to get that communal laughter, it's really a different experience. Whereas when you look at his softcore films, there's only one that's a comedy, and that's Score. And that's already very late in his softcore trajectory. The previous films that he'd made they're distinguished by many things, but one of the things is they're not funny. They're not trying to be funny either. Something like Licorice Quartet is, if anything, one could say that it's a little bit too self-serious. Same with Little Mother and some of the other films from that period. So that's the key difference, that he's making these films as the hardcore films as comedies, which is not something that he really experimented with in the films that he gave his own name to. He's on record, I think it might have been one of the Blu-ray commentaries, where he says that he wanted in his hardcore work to bring, something of a kind of Borscht Belt tradition of humor to his work in hardcore. He's letting the Jewish aspect of his identity kind of fly a little bit more proudly, I think, in those hardcore films than in his somewhat more gentrified and gentrifying softcore works.
I don't remember there being a lot of humor in The Image. It's been a while since I've seen it at this point, and I remember it being very, very serious.
No, it's a serious film. I would say that, to my mind, it's his best film. There's not much to laugh at beyond perhaps some of the occasionally stilted dialogue and the stilted performances, but we can put that to one side. It's a very absorbing, very visceral film, really. I mean, my sense is of Metzger that the last of the sex films that he gave his own name to, leaving aside the princess and the play,
Princess and the Call
There
Girl.
you go. By the end of his work in softcore, and I'm talking here about the film's score and the image, he hit on a form for dramatizing sex effectively that is very visceral, very absorbing. If you look at his earlier films, what you typically have is, there's some plot, then there's sexy. There's a plot, there's sexy, plot and sexy, right? And so on and so forth. And, obviously that's true of, of score and the image as well. You have, moments of, or sex scenes kind of interspersed among the plot action. But I think that what you see in score and the image is the degree to which the sex is integrated fully into the plot, right? Because score is basically about this couple that is trying to persuade another innocent couple to swing both ways, basically. The image is about a man being initiated into sadomasochism. In each case, you have these characters who are being asked to confront taboos, really, and to cross over into that taboo territory. And in both instances, the image and score, we end with very long, very kind of composed, driving, music-driven sequences of sex that are enormously involving because they combine the sex with the logic of the plot. You're kind of experiencing these characters as you're empathizing with these characters as they breach these taboos. And that's a kind of interesting place for you to be as a spectator.
I'm always fascinated by adaptation and adapting other people's work. And Metzger was not a stranger to that. There were several things that he adapted. I mean, you mentioned Misty Beethoven. It's such a great retelling of the Pygmalion story. What was his relationship with the image as a title? And did he ever, as far as you know, talk with the author of it?
I'm not sure whether he spoke to the author of the image, Catherine Robbe-Grillet, although they did meet, I believe, in later years. He definitely consulted with Violette Leduc, the author of Thérèse and Isabelle, before adapting that. Actually, the image and Thérèse and Isabelle make for an interesting pairing. Metzger has basically two strategies for literary adaptation. The first is the kind of loose riff on the basic plot. Right, that would be what you have with Carmen Baby. It's what you have with Camille 2000 as well, and it's what you have with the opening of Misty Beethoven, where you're taking the basic plot of Pygmalion or Carmen or La Dame aux Camélias, and you're basically translating it into a modern day setting with sexual action. With Thérèse and Isabelle and the image, by contrast, these are not loose adaptations. They stay very, very close to the literary source. A lot of the script of Thérèse and Isabelle and the image is directly taken from the literary translations of these books, right? That's like he's effectively turning that into dialogue. The image takes this even further. I mean, the image is structured around a number of chapters, and the film is equally structured around the same chapters with the same chapter headings, right? So though the image and Thérèse and Isabelle are more of his kind of his two most literary adaptations, I think.
You tell a story in Radley Metzger, Man of Taste, around the book, the quote-unquote readaptation, like going from movie book to movie, kind of back to book. And you showed me that before we started recording. Can you talk a little bit about that printing of the image, the paperback?
Metzger's relationship with literary sources and books is itself an interesting one. Metzger's company, his distribution company, Audubon, in the late 60s, he created a book imprint which released tie-in novelizations for his films and for other titles that Audubon distributed as well. It wasn't just film or novelizations of sex films that were printed by Audubon Press. I mean, we also have this absolutely oddball publication that they did, the collected speeches of Spiro Agnew. I don't know what the thought was there. But anyway, so Audubon books were distributed by Ace. In many respects, to return to the image, now, in many respects, I think that Radley Metzger was tracking Grove Press during this period. Grove Press was a book publisher that published kind of outre modernist literature with a high quotient of sexual content as well. And by the end of the 1960s, Grove was also starting to get its feet wet in film distribution. Grove distributed I Am Curious Yellow, for example, which was like one of the kind of landmark films in terms of explicit sex being depicted on film. He starts as a distributor of film, but I think he's interested in making Audubon a kind of Grove-like brand, and so starts to branch out into publication, also releases the soundtracks to many of his films also. Now, the image, this book, is interesting because this is where the circle between Metzger and Grove Press closes. The republication of the image of Jean de Berg's The Image was by Grove Press. This is a Grove Press publication. And it came out before the image, the Metzger's The Image, hit movie screens. What's interesting about this book, though, is if you look at the title on the cover page, it says The Image by Jean de Berg with over 60 photographs by Radley Metzger. It doesn't give any indication that those photographs are stills from a film that he had made, right? As you can see, as I kind of flick through here, there are lots and lots and lots of images here. So that it's almost as though this is being presented as like the photo roman or the fumetti version of like the image, where Grove Press asked Radley Metzger to go and take some photos of people doing S&M style things. So it's somewhat misleading in terms of what you think you're getting here, because it gives no indication that these are photos from a film that is about to be released. It's an oddball publication, but it's at least the publication where the trajectory of Metzger and the trajectory of Grove, like they finally intersected around the image.
Was he aware of this before they published it? I mean, he had to be, right?
You know what? I actually don't know. I'm not sure what the deal was between Grove and Metzger with respect to this book. One imagines that Grove already had the rights to it, potentially got wind that Metzger was making a film version, and so decided to see if what they could do together. But I have no idea what the nature of the deal was between the two.
I'm surprised it doesn't say now a major motion picture.
Yeah, I know, because many of the some of the others do, Civ Holmes' I, A Woman, which was then adapted into the Mac Oldberg film, which Audubon distributed, and that was the film that put Audubon over in terms of being able to facilitate Metzger's directorial efforts. That was released with a major motion picture. Same with Therese and Isabel, right? But the image is released not like that, although one wonders, where are all of these photos coming from, right?
What were some of your biggest challenges putting this book together?
I think in a certain sense, Just kind of getting myself into the headspace for writing this kind of thing was always kind of a challenge. Hiding all of the materials from my kids while I was doing the work, that was a challenge. During the writing process, my kids would have been between the ages of 7 and 10 during all of that. So yeah, that was a very careful thing to do. The challenge is with writing histories of pornography is trying to find where the primary materials are. Where are you going to get like script materials? Where are you going to get business records and so on and so forth? Because obviously, in many of these cases, some of these companies that made these films were more or less fly-by-night operations looking for a quick buck here and there, and they didn't have extensive company records. And even for those companies that were in the game for much longer, like it's difficult to find where they are. That was a challenge. In my previous work on, let's say, the Keystone Film Company, Keystone was founded by Max Sennett, and the Academy Film Archive in LA has the Max Sennett collection. So you just walk to the Academy Library and you look at all the files, and there it is. But pornography doesn't fall under that same duty of archival care, unfortunately, which means that it's harder to find this kind of material.
So where did you end up finding the bulk of it, or did you have to just keep scouring everywhere?
At a certain point, you have to realize, you realize that, okay, so there's a gap where I would ordinarily fill it in with this kind of information, or, I'm not going to have access to this, so I'm going to need to approach this material in a different way. So I'm not going to be doing a detailed research looking at how different versions of the screenplays were developed over a period of time, because that stuff's not available to me. So you move your focus elsewhere. Acknowledge that the gaps are there, when you encounter them, but try to, to navigate your narrative in a way that doesn't make those gaps quite as visible as they ordinarily would be. And, again, I would say that this was where those DVD and Blu-ray commentaries were really a lifesaver. Because they allowed me to incorporate Metzger's own memories and reflections on the work that he did.
What ended up being your favorite of his films?
It's The Image, no question. When there was the retrospective of Radley Metzger down in Lincoln Center in 2014, a retrospective where he was able to introduce all of his films in person, there were still at that point a few films of his that I had not seen, including Score and The Image. And the experience of watching those films was really, it's a very striking experience, because of the ways in which the sex scenes are dramatized in terms of this idea of confronting taboos, the way in which the spectator gets implicated into all of this, and these very sustained sex scenes that end Score and The Image. It was really a kind of bewildering movie-going experience like nothing I'd had before.
If you were to talk as far as some of the biggest themes inside of The Image, I mean, what would you want to convey to people as far as like, this is an important film because of this?
One of the really powerful aspects of The Image is the way in which it dramatizes this confrontation with taboo in a way that when that threshold is crossed, it sparks a kind of chain reaction, right? And that's effectively what then drives the plot. So that we have the main character, Jean, played by Carl, he has to confront his own taboo in terms of engaging in sadomasochistic sexual practice. The moment at which he does this is also the moment where Anne confronts her own taboo in terms of her decision to choose the implement of her own torture, the whip that she will be whipped with. But then that ultimately unlocks the dominatrix character's taboo, which is her desire to put herself in Anne's place, to use Anne as a kind of avatar for what Jean will then do for her. So, like, once that threshold is crossed, like it initiates this chain reaction that unlocks or that makes all of the other characters like now able to confront their, and pass over those thresholds as well. And that kind of Russian doll style structure whereby one taboo opens up another. I don't want to say that this is what the film is about or this is the great message of the film, but I think it's what gives the film its power, right? As you see these characters engaged in that.
Where do you go from here? After you've talked about now the Keystone Cops and all the Keystone stuff, and now we've got, as far as I can tell, as far away from that as you possibly can, a different era, whole different milieu. Where do you go from here?
I'm not really sure. I have some material, obviously not everything that I have on Metzger ended up in the book. I'd like to play around with it for a bit more and see what further articles or papers, presentations I can generate from this, and maybe where let's see where this leads me. In terms of you get requests for podcasts like this, you get requests for other things, like maybe you want to be on this panel, maybe you want to and just blow with the wind a little bit. So that would be one thing that I'd be interested in pursuing, because certainly I would like to do all that I can to help get these films out to a broader public, not just in terms of the book, but in terms of assisting with whatever special features on like Blu-rays or things like that. But I mean, I've also been doing research on a field that has nothing to do with film at all, that has exercised a lot of my attention over the last year or so, which is I do work in new media. I teach new media here at Columbia, among other things. And I've been interested in exploring the history of computational humor, which is the history of attempts by people to get computers to tell jokes. And it's a pretty interesting history that I'm excited to write. I've been researching it for about a year and a half at this point. If Man of Taste is about as far as you could go from Keystone as possible, then this is like, I seem to be jumping around maybe a little bit too much, but that's that's the material that I'm doing active research in at the moment. But I'm hoping to continue doing stuff on Metzger as well. I mean, I do hope that his final film, Sins of Ilsa or Love Standing Up, both titles have been used. I do hope that eventually sees the light of day in some shape or other. And I'd be delighted. I'm in communication with Joe Rubin at Vinegar Syndrome, and anything that we can do to get that film out, whether as a release in its own right or as a kind of extra feature on a Henry Paris DVD, I think would be enormously valuable.
Professor King, thank you so much for your time. This was so delightful talking with you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Anytime, anything that, if you want to do something about Keystone or early sound slapstick, I'd be more than happy to dust off my research from there and talk about that as well. But this was really a pleasure. Thanks so much, Mike.
I'm so curious how you got into filmmaking.
I was at a business school and I went to New York to do an internship at a film production company. And because I was in business school, I thought that I wanted to do production. And then I was doing this internship for a long time in New York. And I also worked for a French director. Doing that, I think the first seed, even though I didn't understand it, but I think it was a very important thing for me to be working very close to someone who was creatively in charge of the project, where I identified very much with him. And I had no idea that I wanted to work with something creative. And I was in business school because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I could get in because I had good grades, basically. I saw Catherine on television, and I didn't know, and this actually has to do not really why I got into filmmaking, but she was really the starting point why I wanted to direct. So I was in Paris and I was watching this very typically French program, 3 hours, discussion about this one topic, no commercial breaks, and with different intellectual disciplines discussing this. And the night theme was taboos around female pleasure, I believe. And people were coming and going, and, there were very, very widespread themes. So, and then after, a woman had talked about how she was abused as a child and many very difficult consequences that got for her. This older woman comes in, very elegant and in a suit. And I, for some reason, thought that she was a representative for the Catholic Church. So when this little lady starts talking about this scene where a half-naked black man is chained by the River Seine and how the scene is lit up by the riverboats that go by, I was like, what? What is she talking about? And my French is quite good, but I was like, did I actually get this right? And then, I recognized her name, but I had no idea who she was, and it was because of her husband. And then she started talking about this contract that she had with a younger woman who had given her her liberty and for her to decide everything in her life. And I was so intrigued, and I was like, why would anyone do that? And why would anyone accept that? What? So I bought her books and I started reading. Lots of time went by, and then I decided that I wanted to meet with her, and I wrote her a letter. And then I went back to Paris, which is, I don't know why I did that, because I'm in Sweden and it's not, for an American, I mean, it is close, but it's also another country and you have to go there. And, I had no idea that she would answer me, and she didn't. By chance, I met someone who knew someone who had a cousin that worked in that editor that, published her books, Édition de Minuit, I think. And I'm like, I'm going to go home soon. And she hasn't answered me yet. And I think it was like I had been there for a week or something. I mean, it's quite crazy. She said, I'll see what I can do. And then suddenly in my email, and the way I remember it is that I just got a landline phone number. It had no address. I must have had an address, but it was probably a very cryptical one, like I couldn't understand what it was from. There was no, what do you call when you have like the heading of the...
Oh, like the subject line or anything?
Subject line, nothing. It was just this number. And I called, and I remember hearing Catherine's voice saying like 01, blah, 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 blah. And I understood that it was her. And I left her a message and I asked her to call me back. And then she called me back. And we had tea the following day at a big hotel. And then I was like, wow, how am I going to convince someone that I should make a film about her? And I have never made a film. And I don't know how to make films. And also, she is 30 years my senior, having read books for 30 years, having met people for 30 years, and et cetera, et cetera, and et cetera. So I was very nervous, not really having a plan. And then we met, and I think she was just a little curious about, this Swedish person. And I think none of us really knew that, this meeting would end up me spending lots of time with her and her closest ones for 5 years after. I mean, I had no clue, and nor did she. And also, I understood something very important later when I thought about it. It's like you don't get like a yes. Obviously, making a documentary film about someone, you can have an agreement, but then, it's something that is, you're negotiating that trust like in any other relationship all the time. So, I mean, what she said yes to was that she said, I'm having dinner with a few friends tomorrow. Would you like to come? And I was like, oh, maybe that's at the slave's house. And it was. But the person who opened the door was a 17-year-old girl in a dress. And I was like, this must be her daughter. And yeah, so that was what sparked this thing. And then I went to a third thing before going back to Sweden. And then I just started spending lots of time with them. Just trying to figure out there were just so many things, I'm Swedish. It was not my language. It's not my, it was like navigating and immigrating in so many different layers of culture. I knew nothing about sadomasochism also, and I've never been really interested in sadomasochism, and I wasn't really, but I did quite rapidly understand that this is, the most incredible magnifying glass on basic human needs and behaviors, her ceremonies. And that was, I was never interested in the exoticism of it or, I did rapidly understand that this is incredible with all the codes and, yeah, sorry, you should ask your questions. I'm just talking. But that is actually how I got into filmmaking. I had this urge of doing this film myself, and that's how I understood that that's what I wanted to do, and that's how I started.
When the cameras weren't rolling, what was she like as a person?
She's very intact. She has lots of integrity. She's very clear with boundaries. She has very good relationships and long-standing relationships around her, I think because of that. There's no chaos around her. She's like the master or mistress of playing with different masks. So it's not like she has a way of being when the camera was not on, but she is constantly sliding in and out of different roles that she plays. I remember understanding that this is a person who is incredibly gifted in playing with these different masks. And I thought very naively that if I could just peel off the layers, I will come into something that is get into the center. And I understood that, of course, we are onions. There is no such thing. It's like when you look, Narcissus is in the water and you move it and, the image moves, and that's her and that's all of us. And now I know that making other films, but I thought that if I just watch closely enough for a long enough time, I would get into the pit. I would get into her center. That obviously never happened. But there is no such thing as something that she puts on and then she's another person. She's just very, she just, she is many things. And she is, she's just an old, cute, considerate bourgeois lady, and she is this mistress of super elaborate ceremonies, and she can say things, she can talk about, having tea or a handshake where the sun doesn't shine with the same face, basically. And she does that, and she knows how to trigger people that way. And it's funny because I'm now editing another thing with the photographer that I was working with, doing The Contract, which became the first short film. And he said that he thought, he doesn't speak French, and he thought that he would understand when what happened. And he realized quite quickly that I don't, because, I can't put whatever is going on with her face and her interactions, what is actually being said. I can't, the body language. So a very rich personality, playful, with lots of integrity. And I think that's so important because I say this with the masks, and also I would really like to put forward how I see how that she never creates chaos around her. So she plays with masks, but in her intimate relationships, she's also very clear, firm, she's very intact. So there's always calm around her, which I really appreciate.
So you mentioned the contract. Can you tell me how that one comes about? Because I found it interesting to see how you had the contract, the second film, and then the ceremony. It's kind of like building up. Or was that intentional, or is that just the way that things had to work out?
As I just said, I started doing this without knowing anything about how to make a documentary film. And then the Swedish Film Institute, a regional fund, and the Swedish National Television launched a competition where they wanted to fund a series of 8 films with one theme, and the theme was the woman in my life. And I was like, this is too good to be true. I have the most incredible story. So I kind of chopped a part of, and I was like, maybe it's smart to do a film from A to Z, and learning. I applied to this, and where I wanted to tell the story from Beverly's point of view, which I did, which became the contract. And then Les Cinq Sens, the 5 senses, was more that we did that for the contract. So that became, another short film that we wanted to just to have it. And then I continued to do the ceremony. But it was, for me, it's really part of the same. It's all the same. It's the same adventure, and also apart from the contract, I spent lots of time with not filming at all. Because since I wasn't at all used to film, or I wasn't comfortable with, approaching the world via a lens, I was much more socially comfortable spending time and feeling like I didn't intrude with anything. So I just spent time to be able to understand, basically. And also they hated being filmed. That's another thing. And I had nothing to compare with. So now I have, and it was really difficult actually, but so they appreciated me, but it was not very easy to film them.
When you are with them, is this more social events, or are you just kind of hanging out? What is that like, kind of building up this relationship with them?
I went with them on vacation with friends. Catherine has her own apartment, and then Beverly has her apartment on the same flight of stairs, but another apartment. And in Normandy, where Catherine has this small castle, Beverly lives in a house on the grounds, but she does not live in the castle. So when I'm there, I usually either, rented a place next to them, or, so I've been traveling with them several times. I've spent so much time with them everywhere. So, and the girl that opened that door the second day I met them, that was Beverly's daughter, and she asked me to be her witness at her wedding. So it's like I've spent so much time with them everywhere, and I've met all the closest friends and work relationships, and so I would say most of the places that they went, I would spend time with them.
This is kind of a trial by fire. You're learning filmmaking while you are making these films. That's pretty intense. How does that go for you? Do you surround yourself with a really good crew, or how does that go?
No, I was all by myself. Not the first one. With the first one, I was with Frederick, who I also had a production in Paris. And I was with Frederick, who is an amazing photographer and filmmaker. Now he has won 2 Palme d'Or with Ruben Östlund. So, he has had an incredible career afterwards. But he was, he was amazing. And I saw a film that he made, and I was just like this. And I asked him if he would come on board and do this with me. And, our first encounter, we spoke for 6 hours. So it was really like just being with Catherine and Beverly, and really not, for the longer I was by myself and then everything that has to do with the ceremonies that we filmed eventually, we did that in Sweden. And then I had a crew with 30 people around me. But that was very much in the end. And the whole relationship and the filming, I was in Paris a year filming. And I spent like 2 years at least just hanging out and being with them and approaching.
You said that they hated being filmed. Did they just change their attitude completely, or how was that when you would pull out the camera? Was it just like, no?
It's hard for me to answer because it was uncomfortable quite often and not flowy. As I said, because I had never made a film before, I didn't know what to expect. And I didn't, I thought that was kind of normal, that it would not be, and that it would be rather, intruding. I mean, now I wouldn't do a film like that. I would, but by then I didn't know. And I also didn't know that they knew. It was quite recently when Claire said to me something where I understood that they definitely knew that they were making my life very hard as a filmmaker. But we never talked about it, actually. So it would be more, also, you can say that, but you can also change another point of view, is that Catherine asked me to sign a contract where she would have a last look. And when she said that, I have no poker face whatsoever. And when she said that, how much I did understand that would be, of course, Catherine is someone who is in control of most things that she does in her life. So that would be, very something to expect. But when she said that to me, I realized that there was no way that I could give that to her. No way that I could spend 5 years and having to, in the editing room, basically negotiating. And it just came from my gut and she looked at me and she's like, oh, I really see that this is not something that I think is pretty normal. And I said, yes, I agree. And then she refrained from that and she said, okay, we're not going to do that, but I'm not going to sign any contract with you. I'm not going to sign either, like a participants agreement, and I will watch what I say, and we will have no contract. And that's how we worked. That's also incredible. And I know that her friends told me when they saw the film, they were like, I do not understand how you can have her say things like this in front of camera. And the way that she is, this is something that we don't even see without cameras. And Catherine said when we premiered the film in front of 600 people in Copenhagen, it was quite nervous for all of us. And she said that she thought that she could control everything. But of course, year after year after year, that she couldn't. And that it was quite, that she was quite taken when she saw the film the first time, because she realized that, not even her.
What else are you doing at the time? How are you paying the bills while you're making this documentary?
I was working at a hotel. I was waitressing at night. I was in the bar. I was in the breakfast room. I remember, of course I remember it, but it was also, I had quite a good education and I was doing this, and of course I couldn't live off it. I think I invested everything that I got for I even bought my equipment. I borrowed money to buy my equipment. So, and I didn't really know. I was like, and I had like a stomach ache every time I was going to pay my phone bills and then I had a friend that a childhood friend that became this manager at a hotel, and I called her and I was quite desperate. And I was like, do you have any job openings? And I have worked as a waitress all over the world. And, and she said, yeah, sure. And I started working, and I was so grateful to get a job where I actually earned money. So yeah, that's what I was doing.
So are you filming every weekend, or just how does that work?
I was probably going every second month for the first 2 years, and then I didn't film. And then I stayed in Paris for a year, and then I filmed regularly. And then I worked as a waitress in Paris as well. But then I was based in Paris, so I was not going to and from.
Where did you actually shoot that footage of the area where you have some of the submissives, like the barking and the stairwell? Like it's one of the main centerpieces of the film.
That I shot in Gothenburg, 20 meters from the house where I grew up. It's crazy, but that's so. We flew in, Catherine and Beverly. We had prepped everything and prepped with their wardrobe and, accessories. And then I had a production designer in America. I mean, she's Swedish, but she was in New York. She is in New York. Elle Kunos, her name is. She did the production design, and we worked with real things that we gathered together from Beverly and Catherine, and then we cast people, dancers, and one active BDSM person from the community, but mostly dancers. And then we basically created this world in this house together for 3 days. It was amazing. It was incredible.
How easier or difficult was it finding some of the archive material and kind of giving us more of her backstory?
I went to the archives and I met, the Olivier Corpet, who was in charge of the archives, is also a friend of Catherine's, and they have them in Normandy. And I went there, and they granted the archives for free to me to use. So that was very kind of them. And I just spent time there and watching and looking, and I wanted to grasp her interplay with Alain and her as a young person, and before switching from being submissive to. So yeah, as I remember it, it was not very hard. It was more, you have to look and listen and basically talk to people and, finding out. But yeah.
What was the most difficult part of putting the documentary together?
The fictionalized scenes or whatever. I mean, it was almost like an installation. It was incredible to make, and I had so much fun. It was also very nervous. I was like, I'm going to have men in shorts barking. And I remember when we cast for that scene, and one of the beast hens, as we call them, Daniel, came in, and I didn't know him. He's a dancer. He came in, and I started giving him directions, and I just burst into laughter, which is, you can't do that when you have someone you just don't do that. And I couldn't stop myself. I was so embarrassed by my own scene and my own, like, I was so embarrassed, I think, or I know. And he was just doing what I was telling him. And it just created this, and I couldn't stop laughing. And wonderfully, because he was so good, he got the part. So, which, obviously, and of course I excused myself, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, this is unforgivable, and I'm so sorry, you're so good, and I'm so embarrassed. Why? And then, I was just like, but this could be, if I don't get this right, this is going to be so ridiculous. And that could hurt many people, and, I will feel ashamed for them if I don't get. I need, people cannot laugh at this. That was my. And then I'd heard someone say, I think it was an actor, I don't remember, had said that if I don't feel that it swindles a little bit, is that an English word that you get like dizzy? If you don't feel that, the ground is moving a little bit under your feet and that you lose control, then you've put the barrier too low. And that was really something that I said to myself, because I was very nervous. Also, those scenes cost a lot of money, and it was 30 people and everyone was watching me, and it was my, but and Catherine was going to come, and I was also directing Catherine doing things, that was also insane. But it went really well, and I'm it went well. But I was but I wouldn't say that was the hardest, because that was actually quite fluid for me, weirdly enough. I was very alone. That was the hardest. I was very new, dealing with all these relationships, handling things. And there was just so much that I didn't know, and I really didn't have people to call. There are still many things that I don't know, but I have more people that I can ask. I just had to kind of navigate. I mean, there were times where I thought that maybe it's dumb that I don't show them more in their everyday lives. And then I was like, but it's not interesting. And now I know, I really feel that I made the right decision. But, people were questioning why, we really want to see her. And I was like, but she's not very interesting having tea and eating cookies. She's interesting here. And this is also where I would get access to her. She's intellectually very free. And she's incredible, the way that she looks at things, and, in our interviews. And as you know, in documentary filmmaking, it has like talking heads has kind of a low status. And I love that. I love hearing people reflect and talk of their point of views and their lives. And, I still do. So the ceremonies are really at the center. That is what is incredible. And to approach that, I also need to do that in fiction, because I can never do them justice, walking in, even though she would never have let me also, but having, this, to understand the soul of what she does, it needed to be, I think what we did was the most truthful that we could ever do. And also, Christian said that it's weird. I mean, I've been to some of this. I mean, I put it together from books and, as this thing that would go through but, obviously it's not based on my fantasies and he said that even though I know it's fiction, I can't see it, which is quite incredible. But I do think that creating that bridge for the audience to walk into something as the rawest, the most truthful, we had to fictionalize it.
Speaking of the audience, how was the film received when it came out?
We launched it on 8th of March, so the Women's Day, and it was it was the same day as 50 Shades of Grey came out in Sweden. So that was quite good from a press point of view. So it was like, we have the real thing, and then we have this. I did an incredible amount of press. Also because, it was so spectacular. In Sweden, we're not very used to acknowledging it's our identity is that hierarchies between people, they exist kind of in a class system, but we don't really talk about them if it's not like in a social democratic class system kind of way, or between men and women. So that was sometimes a little hard, to have like this asymmetric relationship that is voluntary. I could, but I feel that we managed to approach that with many interesting people in different forums, so that we could, in France, there is no intellectual worth their name that haven't written, on philosophy, on economy, and eroticism. In Sweden, it becomes very quickly something that is more in the pants, not up here. So, but I think we managed to kind of, do that in a good way. And then something that was really surprising to me is that so many people identified with the characters way beyond the BDSM. It was more like people that felt that I could hear that they reacted, that the people that felt odd in their lives felt very much uplifted by the characters in the film, which was really beautiful. People had made, feel, I don't know what to, I mean, I don't remember that specifically, but I remember people coming up to me and expressing that I have felt weird and, like outsiders from many different kind of, felt very touched, I think, by the characters around Catherine and the film. But that was in Sweden, and then it traveled a lot in different countries and in many festivals. And I heard someone who was working at a cinema that I met years after when it came out, who said that people usually had a way of talking about things when they had seen a film. And he was a machine operator in the cinema. And that he said that when people had seen this film, it was quite often they were silent, or it was quite awkward, or they would talk about like something completely different. That he saw reactions in people that he didn't usually see. That people were a little, yeah. But the film generally got, I think it was received quite well. Not hated, which you could think.
After the ceremony, you made a film, at least over here, it's called Mating. I think it's called Pairing. What was that experience like for you?
The very interesting shift for me was that I had filmed so incredibly special people, different and particular people in many different ways. Very intellectual and very this and very, kind of spectacular is the word. They were all, particular and spectacular in many ways, I felt. And doing mating, I was approaching something, and I worked for several months interviewing like 40 digital natives. It was like I did this research. And then I really tried to film like normal people and not spectacular at all. And I was looking for them to be different from each other in terms of where in the country we filmed and, different social, economic, whatever, and education. But I really tried to approach them as normal Swedes as possible, or living in Sweden. And what I learned is that everyone, because I was starting out also to do something like a fictional series. That was the idea from the beginning, and then use this material to write. And then I had all these interviews. I walked into people's houses where I'd never been before. I put up a camera. I filmed them for between 1 to 2 hours, and they were amazing and so touching. And there was not one single interview that was not good. It was incredible. So that taught me that when it comes to casting and when it comes to people, that when you talk to them about things that matter to them, everyone is interesting. That was and I still hold that for true, because now I'm doing a very different film, but it's true.
Well, I was going to ask you, what are you working on these days?
I'm working on 3 different films. Now I'm in Kiruna, way up north in Sweden. And I'm doing a project called What's Up Sweden that's going to air. It's going to be in cinemas and Swedish television before the election, but it's going to be a series of miniature portraits of people all over the country, basically. And I'm doing the same thing. I interview people in smaller communities that have gone through very big social shifts the last few years. I interview them, and then I ask them if I can come to their homes, and I make like a family portrait of them. And then working on something, a restorative justice project. It's a program given in South African prisons that targets people who have been committed for very serious crimes. And they go through this program with the aim for them to take responsibility for their crimes. And in order to take responsibility for their crimes, they need to not only admit to their crimes, but they need to be able to understand the consequences of their crimes in the victims' lives. And then in the case that the victims want to, they're supposed to meet. So they're preparing both victims and perpetrators in this very intense process. Yeah, and I'm trying to get a permit to film that in a South African prison. And I've been there. I've been to 5 different facilities, and I've been working for this organization, and I've been prepping, and now I'm trying for almost 4 years to get a permit to film. So I really hope that that would go through, but it's a marathon. And then I'm filming couple married where Matthias and Karl Olof, and Matthias got a stroke at 42 that it was a miracle that he survived, but he's been very affected. And it's about, a marriage for better and for worse, you could say. And very few marriages survive stroke, and they're incredible together. And I'm filming them, and I'm in my 5th year.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being so easy to schedule with. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about The Image, and it's amazing to me, all of the parallels. We were talking a little bit about the story of O and this film, and I mean, they're both based on books by women authors from France. They came out, was it 2 years apart, I think?
Yeah, I think Story of O, I think, is 54, and Image is 56, the novels.
Yeah, and they're both written under pseudonyms, of course. And just to find out, last week we watched Writer of O, and to see the real Pauline Riage and just how tender and everything she seems, and just so sweet, and it's just like, oh, I kind of wish you were my granny, and then you see Catherine Robbe-Grillet in a film like La Cérémonie from 2014, you're like, oh, she's the real deal. Okay.
I wish she was my granny.
Seriously. I was just thinking that.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
She is, I mean, oh my God, you could just make a movie about her life. Like, I mean, yes, obviously there's the ceremony, but like, I mean, I just feel like, you could even go, as I think you noted, Mike, it's like we don't even get to talk to her until like halfway through this documentary, which is about her life as a dominatrix. She's still alive. Catherine Robbe-Grillet is still alive. She's 95 years old, and she's still, as far as I know, still doing it.
Oh yeah, she's 24/7. We talked last week about 24/7 BDSM relationships. This is 24/7, where she lives all of this. And I went back to and I watched a film called Erotica: A Journey into Female Sexuality from '97, and that had interviews with both Catherine Robbe-Grillet and Dominique Horry, and I think Horry was I think she passed away pretty soon thereafter, and Catherine Robbe-Grillet I loved that she's wearing the outfit that we see in some of the scenes inside of La Cérémonie, where it's like it's almost like she's mourning. It's like a veil. Yeah. And it just is like, I'm protecting myself, even though everybody knows who I am and all this, even though I guess it also took a long time for them to figure out who wrote The Image.
So very similar, again, similar like kind of storylines, even though they came out a few years apart. So when The Image came out, obviously it's under a masculine pseudonym, Jean de Berg. And there was a similar debate about authorship and, kind of, there were some hints like, and again, we're sort of, I talked a little bit in the last episode about sort of the French publishing world at this time and the intelligentsia, and all these people knew each other. So like, it was kind of like they were like the sort of intellectual, the cultural intellectual like stars of that time. And so like, people knew, obviously everyone knew who Marilyn Roberts was because he was like, the darling of the, new French new novel. I don't think anyone necessarily thought like his wife, actually it wasn't his wife at the time. They married like the year after this was written, but his partner had written this book. I mean, there was kind of and there's also some like sort of interesting, I think, debate around the introduction to this book, because the introduction is supposedly written by Pauline Réage.
Yeah, that seemed very strange.
I've read there's debate about that, and I think if you read it, it doesn't really seem, my impression is that it is not her style. So I think the preface, supposedly by Pauline Réage, is probably either Catherine herself or possibly Ellen. It's dedicated to PR. Pauline, you would think Pauline Réage, right? But I think it was, I can't remember whose book I read this in, but some author posited that it PR, because Alain Robbe-Grillet's middle name is Paul, so it'd be Paul Robbe-Grillet PR. Someone's theory. Interesting. But yeah, so again, so lots of questions about authorship, and I don't know at what point. I mean, we know a lot about the genesis of the story of O as a novel. We don't know as much, or at least not as much as published, about how the image was written, like how it came into creation. I mean, obviously Robbe-Grillet was a writer, and he probably encouraged Catherine to write. And they had a very unique and strange relationship, much different from Dominique Horry and Jean Paulhan. I think they met in Turkey while he was, I don't know if he was working on a film or something like that. But they met. She was, younger than him, I think, a bit. And she's a very, I don't know if you ever, I don't know if you really get the sense of this movie, but she's like a tiny, tiny woman. She's in some of Robbe-Grillet's films, actually. She's in L'Immortel. She's in Trans-Europe Express. Like, she's this like super tiny, petite woman. So yeah, and you see her in some of the home video shots as a younger woman in the ceremony. But they met, and I guess Alain Robbe-Grillet basically said to her, he said he loved her, but he said, I have very certain desires. I need a woman who, he's like, I hate this quote, but it is a quote. It says something like, I think it's from that the Erotica movie that you were just talking about, Mike, was he said, like, I want to hurt a woman. And like, because he's he sort of admits he's a sadist, and that he needs a woman, he needs his wife to kind of fulfill that role for him. And it's kind of why he says like, oh, I thought I would never find someone who'd be able to do this for me. But Catherine, being a very sort of unique person, and who had already kind of admits that she had these kinds of feelings and ideas in her head, was amenable to this. And so their relationship, he was the dominant, she was the submissive, and they actually had a contract, like a written contract. And there's a Vanity Fair article that reproduces the contract, so you can go, if you you can Google it, actually, like contract Robbe-Grillet, and see, like, she never signed it, but she sort of willingly submitted to it. And as she says in the ceremony, she did this with the purpose that, like, it kind of granted her, ironically, it granted her the freedom to do other things in life that she wanted to do. Like she said, I submitted to this type of relationship, and, sort of in exchange, he took care of me. I had the freedom to, go anywhere and do what I wanted to. And, she actually, had affairs with other people, and, traveled and just did, just had, it basically, she says that submitting to that type of relationship gave her the independence that she so desired. So they had like this, and they were married they were married until his death in, like, I think 2008. So they were probably married like 50 plus years, and, had this relationship at some point. And I'm actually not sure what she's written another book called The Rights of Women, where she kind of talks a little bit about her, her philosophies and ideas and experiences in S&M, and Jean de Berg, yeah, exactly, and which is how she's also now known professionally as a dominatrix. You see her referred to in the film as Jean de Berg. Yeah, so at some point, she starts appearing on French TV in like the 80s doing interviews as, kind of, I'm a professional dominatrix, and, makes headlines, and people knew who she was. So it's like, even though she went by under the student and people knew that she was Robbe-Grillet's wife, and kind of like, oh my God, the, wife of this incredibly famous, well-respected, exactly, is a scandal. I don't remember exactly how that kind of transferred over, but I think at some point, like, she realized, she wanted to, be a dominant rather than a submissive, and maybe she still was submissive in a relationship with Robbe-Grillet. But yeah, it's so interesting to see kind of like this trajectory of hers, and now she's like this sort of grande dame dominatrix, and coordinating all these ceremonies, as the title refers to. And
yeah, I found it interesting that they don't call them scenes over there, that they call them ceremonies.
She was trained in the theater. She really was interested in theater when she was younger, like, before she met Robbe-Grillet. And so I think, a few people in the documentary allude to this, that, part of it's this theatricality that she, as part of her interest in being a dominatrix is not necessarily like sexual, but it's like wanting to coordinate a scene, like wanting to, pick out the way everything looks and like, sort of coordinate everything and, direct it even. So I think that kind of relates to the sort of interest she had when she was younger in the theater and performance, because they're all kind of a performance.
Mentioning the whole thing of calling it a ceremony instead of a scene, one thing I really loved that was a quote, I think it was from like the 80s interview that they show of with her and the ceremony, where she mentioned, I'm going to mess up the quote, so I'll paraphrase, but basically kind of blending the sacred with the profane. She doesn't say profane, but basically mixing that something, a sense of the sacred with something that people on the outside view as very profane, as very sort of dirty. And I really love that. I thought that was such a great way to hear it phrased. And when we get to see, which I love how beautifully shot all of the ceremony scenes are gorgeous, and what a space to have what a wonderful building. I kept thinking, like, somebody needs to do something for those on a budget. Like, what do you do if you live in a tiny apartment and you're trying to make a living? One thing that I really thought was fascinating, especially comparing it to watching The Image, is the tenderness and the sense of real trust and respect that all of the mistresses have with their, I don't like using the term slaves, but with their slaves. I just thought that was something that was actually very sweet, and something I kind of, again, where I wish, it made me kind of wish we had more of that with Claire and Anne, but I also kind of like, well, that's a different story though. And I think Claire and Anne's dynamic is a little more murky. But that's kind of the beauty of writing erotica, making erotic films, is I think a lot of people on that side just view as like anything sexual is just strictly for prurient purposes. But it's like, well, no, you're an artist. You can explore it to explore themes of humanity. Humans were messy. We're absolutely the messiest primates on this planet. And why not use art to be like, yeah, sex gets messy, love gets messy, power gets messy. And when you're mixing all of those ingredients together with some people that may or may not be quite damaged, it's going to get very interesting. And that's why I think it makes like for I love that we're getting to discuss this film and these artists. I can't believe you guys are almost making me want to watch Story of O again.
Or read the book.
I was so disappointed with it. Yeah, I'll read. I have the book. I've not revisited it in a long time. I think I'll do that instead. And then I'll just watch Teriyama, which I would do anyways. But
obviously, like, both of these films are not just body parts, and the books are not, these are stories with like an incredible amount of character development, especially for the women characters. And I think both O and Claire, I think both of them are clearly like on a journey. And we see them in the story of O, we kind of see everything through O's point of view. And even though in The Image we don't really see Claire's point of view, and she's kind of opaque to us in a way, we still through Jean's perception, I think we kind of feel her emotion. We get the sense of like, how she changes as she progresses towards the end of the novel. And I just think that's just proof that these are just literary classics. Like no, you can't really question that. I just think they're just beautiful stories about human beings and all their faults and all their, their messiness, as you were saying, like, and think it's so important to remember that these are important works of literature that we should still read and think about, and we shouldn't dismiss them as, kind of, oh, well, this is, I don't, like X, Y, and Z that happens in this. I'm like, but there's still so many things you can talk about that don't even have anything to do with that. Just, character development, just, sort of the way they move through the text is just so interesting to me.
So The Image comes out 2 years after Story of O. And as for me, The Image is a gut punch and accomplishes so much more in 40-some pages than Story of O does in a few hundred. It feels like a few hundred pages. I'm not sure how long the actual book is. I know it took the reader 7.5 hours to get through Story of O. I think they could probably get through The Image in, what do you think, 2 hours, an hour? I mean, I guess it really feels like it is a screenplay. I think it would read about 2 hours to get through the whole
about 120
thing.
pages, I think, versus, I don't have The Image I don't have Story of O next to me, but The Image is about 120 pages, which is pretty short.
On the Kindle app that I was reading, it was, and you can't really trust the page numbers on that thing. Let's say I got through it very darn quickly. And when it comes to the Story of O movie and The Image, I didn't know that The Image was supposed to come out before Story of O, and it feels like the way that Story of O, the book, eats the lunch of The Image because it comes out first and really makes such a huge splash, and it's not like you go through, your dirty bookstores and you see The Image, you usually see Story of O. It just feels like it's not nearly as well known, is what I'm trying to say. And then when it comes to The Image movie and the Story of O, again, it feels like The Image is just not nearly as known. And for me, for both of those, it's like, wow, this one really hits home for me, not the earlier one. Not trying to set up a fight between Story of O and The Image. It just feels like I wish that this had made more of a splash because, again, I guess that's some pea humor there. The whole idea of this being so hard to find for so many years, it wasn't like Story of O where it was so much easier to find. And then, of course, there's no sequels. We talked about the whole O-verse last time, and you got O being a secret agent going over to Hong Kong or Japan, and being part of a revolutionary Chinese war and all these things. You don't have that. I mean, I guess that's kind of like why we still talk about Emmanuel, is that there's just countless Emmanuel things, as opposed to. And I'm sorry, I didn't know that it actually was a book, so now I feel like I am obligated to read the book of Emmanuel. I just thought it was a movie series.
Yep, it's a book.
It is the book. Now,
Jessica teaches me all kinds of things.
This is. I mean, Mike, you're really getting to the crux of kind of why I wanted to talk about these movies and books together. Both of them as films and their literary history are tied up together in a lot of ways. And you're definitely right. I don't think The Image, the book or the film, gets the kind of attention it deserves compared to something like Story of O. And why that is, I don't know. I mean, at least if we're looking at it in terms of the film, yes, it's as you point out, it's Metzger did this before there was going to be a Story of O movie, and then it got delayed because of legal issues that were happening in the U.S. and his fear of being incriminated because this is when the whole conversation about should pornography, hardcore pornography be illegal, and for a while it was there was such uncertainty that he was and again, this is part of what caused him to take his name, to adopt the name Henry Paris, is because he was afraid of making. But he doesn't use Henry Paris for The Image, but he presumably because it came before. But
what was it? He shot the private afternoons of Pamela Mann while he was waiting for The Image to be released.
Yeah, that's
wow.
true. That's true.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it was it was shot. I can't remember. It was sometime in it was shot in 1973, according to the Rialto Report article. There's lots of things that sort of complicated things that happened during production. Again, please read the article. It's so great. And then, like I said, this whole legal case, sort of held it up even further. And in the interim, that's when the Story of O film came out, and it kind of basically stole the thunder of The Image. It just kind of, and although to be honest, I mean, there was such a zeitgeist, as I was talking about the last episode, for the kind of BDSM kind of content in cinema. There was so much of it. It wasn't as novel as it might have been if it had actually come out in 73, 74 before The Story of O hit theaters. And as Radley Metzger points out, he himself thinks it's a better film than The Story of O. So he agrees with you on it.
The fact that it's skirting that hardcore line could not have helped it, though, at least in the US. And that was such a fascinating and such a strange time for softcore and erotic cinema in the US, because you were seeing films that were softcore that were starting to kind of flirt. Tide was turning. Yeah, once Deep Throat hits and Porno Chic. I mean, even before Deep Throat, you have something like, Bill Osco's Mona. Things were shifting, and it's kind of like a Pandora's box. You can't really go back to just even though softcore still, I mean, especially once cable hit, as any of us children of the 80s that were sneaking to watch Cinemax.
Speaking of the 80s, though, the whole Meese report and all the scuttlebutt that came out from that prevented so many BDSM videos. Like, you could not have sex with someone if they were tied up.
It's completely wild. And the sad thing is you had a mix of companies that were just butchering in some cases, their main prints.
God, yeah, raw deal.
And it's a bit for absurd, yeah, because which it's one of my favorite projection booth episodes ever, the one on Raw Talent, there's no BDSM in that film. There's nothing in that film. Like, Jerry Butler masturbates in a raw chicken. A turkey. Oh, sorry. I thought it was almost like a Cornish game hen. I remember it being kind of like a small little dude. It's been a while. Anyways,
I'm just getting ready for Thanksgiving. That's all.
Sorry. Well, see, if you're vegetarian, you don't have to worry about it, because he's not having sex with a tofurkey. And then there's like a fight scene at Cafe Flesh, which thank God we finally now have uncut. The two scenes, there's a girl that's restrained while two women are having sex. The girl that's restrained, nobody's touching her. That got cut. Max getting possibly murdered off screen, that was cut. If they were making wild decisions, but it was a bit of absurd because it's consenting adults. I don't care if it's fisting, if it's water sports, whatever. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. But I mean, it's like anything with the government, right? It's like they were doing shit that was way worse, and it's like, oh, look at these pornographers. Don't look at what we're doing. It's a smokescreen. Censorship is always a smokescreen for something that's actually really insidious going on that has nothing to do with art.
I think I picked up that Cafe Flesh set. Are you on that?
I am in the limited edition.
Okay, that's the one I believe I got.
Yep, I got it too.
Sweet. Case in point, actually, going back to projection booth history, I remember when we were prepping for Water Power, you had sent an Enema Bandit movie with Sharon Mitchell from the early 90s. And there was no enemas. It was PG-13 practically. It was like an R. It was not even like a soft R, maybe. It was, because that was how I felt. Poor enema people back then. I mean, it's not my thing, as much as I joke about it, because I think it's funny and I'm basically Beavis, but you imagine these poor people being like, what do you do with that? What do you even do with that? And also, I mean, that's literally, it's so silly. I'm offended by by horrible Hollywood movies that cost enough money to feed a third world nation when it's the blandest movie you'll ever see, and you'll forget about it the minute you walk out of the theater. That is, to me, offensive. Am I going to try and ban it? No, of course not. I will make fun of it, though.
It was really fascinating to see the mind behind the image, and just she practices what she preaches so much. I'd also like to go back and see the earlier film that Lena Mannheimer made with Robbe-Grillet, and that is The Contract, which was a short from 2010. I wonder if anything from that made it into the later documentary, but it was about the Oath of Allegiance or contract that was signed by is it Beverly Charpentier, who we see in the film quite a few times. And I love that Mannheimer kind of has this relationship with them, so I'd be curious to see more of her stuff too, because some of those shots.
Part of the way, at least the English world, came to know about Catherine Robbe-Grillet's dominatrix career was through this Vanity Fair article that appeared, I can't remember I think it was 2014 maybe around the same time as this film, that was about, kind of her relationship with Beverly, her history, her relationship with Beverly. It was like I said, it was written by Tony Bentley. And there's a great video on YouTube that, and I don't know what year it's from, because there was Alliance Française in New York brought Catherine Robbe-Grillet and Beverly Charpentier over to talk about her life as a dominatrix and possibly the film. And there's a long interview with Tony Bentley, Beverly, and Catherine on YouTube that you can watch, and it's from her visit to New York. Wish I could have been there. And it just sounds really great. And I think Radley Metzger actually went to that talk, and
He did.
As Ashley
Yes.
relates in the article, that like they finally met. That was the first time they met, because he had never met her when he acquired the rights for the book.
That's wild to me, especially since he shot it in France.
There was some animosity, actually, I think, when Alain Robbe-Grillet, when the film finally came out, and Alain Robbe-Grillet kind of saw, as, again, this is from Ashley's article, came out, he kind of saw a chance to make a little extra money off the film's popularity, because it actually did really, it wasn't a critical success, but the image did financially very well in the US. And I think Robbe-Grillet said, like, well, we should be making a little bit more money off of that. And apparently the contract that Radley Metzger had was like watertight, and like it was there was absolutely no way. But Robbe-Grillet said, like, I want more money, or I'll hold this up from being released in France. And I can't remember if that's actually what happened, but yeah, he was kind of a dick, as Robbe-Grillet often was. I digress. He did get to meet Catherine. They met together at this event in New York, and just to be a fly on the wall, right?
Oh, goodness. That picture is adorable, too, because I know I've ever seen a picture. I think it was part on Rialto Report. And there's Radley looking like with that great head of hair, just looking like this handsome older gentleman. And there's little tiny Catherine looking like a S&M nun. Like, I don't know why she looked like this adorable nun who will just thrash her ass into submission in the best of ways. It's glorious. I'm really glad I watched the ceremony. I'm glad this came up in discussion. I thought that was getting to see the different personalities of the other doms too. I thought was like not just Beverly, but some of the and certainly Beverly's journey from going from like being a dom, and her talking about her experiences with men and her lovers even before she went into that, I thought was so fascinating and such a cool. I mean, for being such a kind of a fairly short feature length documentary, what we do get to see, of each person, it doesn't feel like enough, but it's just enough to where you're really grateful to get it.
All right, let's go ahead and take another break, and we'll be back with a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
What do you want?
Don't resist.
Where's Daniel?
He's not here.
Is Daniel with you?
Where is he? I don't know.
What day is it?
15th.
12 days.
Was there an argument?
Why do you think he's in danger?
He wouldn't leave without an explanation. He might leave a lover like this, but he's not going to walk away from his work.
Do you think there could be another woman involved?
Can I undress you?
Don't mind me.
Come on.
Can be dangerous listening to your impulses. Do I know you?
I know a lot of men.
Why are you doing this? How long will you keep me here?
Silly, isn't it? When you love somebody, but you let them slip through your fingers.
Why me?
Because you're beautiful. Daniel, where have you been?
That's right. We'll be back next week with a look at the 2006 film, The Book of Revelation. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Jessica and Heather. So, Jessica, what is the latest with you, ma'am?
Not very much, but if you're interested to see what I'm up to, you can visit my Instagram. It's la.bell.otero, and you can just see what I'm up to there.
I always enjoy your Instagram. And Heather, how about yourself?
Jessica's Instagram is the most aesthetically pleasing Instagram account. So she is a master curator of fabulous art and imagery. So, and for me, you can read. I think it's available for pre-order right now on Vinegar Syndrome. I got to do an essay for Romeo and Juliet, which is one of two. I have my two favorite Troma films. I won't tell everybody the other one. It'll be a surprise for later, but Romeo and Juliet's number 2. I love it. It was such an honor getting to write about this film. And yeah, so it's available for pre-order. It's a beautiful set. And also, via Umbrella Entertainment, I have a video essay on the release of ABCs of Death, where I talk about Noboru Uguchi's F is for Fart. I love it. I had such a great time with that. Uguchi is an absolute trip of a director, a great Japanese surrealist filmmaker. And yeah, talk about story of the eye. I feel like Batil would appreciate at least a little bit of that. And yeah, and it's a beautiful set. And so it's an honor to get to be doing that. For other sundries, I'm always working on stuff I can't talk about, but you can go to my Linktree, linktree.com/Mondo Heather. You'll find my social media, my Patreon, my website, other podcasts, articles, canned goods and baked goods, all the fun essentials. So.
And I too highly recommend Heather's Patreon.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm going to say baked goods, and I'm like, oh, you have not.
I'm sure I would love your baked goods.
My muffins are to die for.
Thanks again, ladies, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. Do you want to support physical media and get great movies in the mail? Head over to scarecrow.com and try Scarecrow Video's incredible rent-by-mail service, the largest publicly accessible collection in the world. You'll find films there entirely unavailable elsewhere. Get what you want, when you want it, without the scrolling. And yes, they have the image available. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They're all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projectionbooth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.